everyone. I'm here with the Thunderous One to talk about the UK. The UK, as you know, or Airstrip One, as it is more accurately described, is the canary in the coal mine for the West. It is it is a confluence of communism through the Fabian Society, and of course Islam, and of course it's all the worst aspects of, shall we call it, gay socialism. Let's put it that way. Plus Islam, and yeah, things have not gone well. So Thunderous, welcome back. What is happening right now?
Hi, Lloyd, and hi to everybody that's watching the show or in the chat. Welcome. What's going on in the UK? I think anybody that's watching the media at the moment that can see that the UK is in an organised chaos at the moment. Every day seems to be, I think the only way I can say it or describe it is if we go back to previous shows. I would send you links to things, Lloyd, but I'd be sending probably enough to cover a show that was once per month. I think we're getting to the point where we're getting enough material for a show every week. Such is the number of events taking place in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, things are definitely not well. So yeah, so hello and welcome. Just Janice, Anthony, hello there. Good to see you. Yeah, so let me show you guys something. This is something that may prove interesting. The last 6 UK prime ministers failed to serve their full term, which means the last 6 UK prime ministers were kicked out or had to abandon their post or resigned in less than the standard full term. And if Keir Starmer resigns soon, or perhaps even tomorrow, as some news reports indicate, he will be the 7th UK Prime Minister to quit before he's even served his full term. And the last UK Prime Minister to serve a full term with a single party majority was elected 25 years ago in 2001. That would be Tony Blair. Now, I think we can take away from this that the UK government is dysfunctional, completely dysfunctional. And it is time to restore Britain, because it is time to make Britain great again. Your thoughts on that, Thunderous?
Well, it's interesting to note that 6 have failed to fulfill their full term. Didn't realise that, but for me personally, I see things in a different lens to yourself, Lloyd. I see these things as being by design, no accident. I think that these prime ministers of late go in, they do something, they enact something, they implement something, and then they leave and somebody else takes over, almost like a distraction. So I don't, at the moment with the Keir Starmer, we've just had, for example, the court case with the guys that firebombed a house and a car that was linked to Keir Starmer, but the boys apparently, allegedly, were financed by Russia and Putin to do the attacks that they did, which is interesting because as a 58-year-old man, I remember when Russians, if they had something to do with removing politicians or attacking politicians, they would use umbrellas with poison ball bearings on London Bridge. Or then was it plutonium in cups of tea? And then there was the incident with the toxin that was sprayed over a father and a daughter. Was it Stripple? Something like that, whatever it was. So I don't believe the narrative there. I think the narrative is a bit of a distraction. But
still, yeah. It's not a good look. I mean, imagine every 2 years there's a scandal of some type, or there's some kind of national emergency or some such political incident, scandal that forces someone out of government. I mean, you're about to have the 7th in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an indication of a problem, regardless of what the reasons are. It is an indication of an unstable government. It's an indication that either the government are completely incompetent or they're being run by people who are, shall we say, not the people you think are running the government. So
I've often said to you, Lloyd, that there's a power structure above politics worldwide. Now, that doesn't mean to say that everybody worldwide knows their role in the powers that are above me, but I do see a structure where because there's a pattern everywhere. I don't think we can look at any country and say, look, they've got the ideal model. They're all becoming more dysfunctional than they've ever been previously. You've only got to look at America, look at Italy, look at Germany, look at, say,
Yeah,
France.
but then you can also show that you've got more infiltration by Islam, you've got more infiltration by the communist Chinese, you have more money coming in. So, of course, you're dealing with the fifth column, you're dealing with traitors, you're dealing with spies, you're dealing with people who have sold themselves over to the enemy. So, of course, I mean, and that's what the enemy does.
And this is what we're then if that's true, then this chaos is what we would expect. But from my vision, the way I see the world, I see this as being an organized chaos. I don't see it as chaos for chaos because people are making bad decisions. I think people are being forced into making decisions because there's, as I say, in my estimation, there's an end game agenda, and I think the world is being driven towards it.
Yeah, it's obvious. I mean, you've got the collusion between Muslims, you've got the collusion between them and the socialists, things like the Fabian Society, and of course, they both ultimately are anti-Western, anti-Christian, and yet once they gather some sort of power, they're going to be at each other's throats. And I think the socialists are unready for just how violent the Muslims are going to be. Yeah. So, as you can see here, Storm is expected to announce his departure on Monday, which is tomorrow. So, yeah, good riddance, but yeah, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, but that's like that's like separating one demon for another demon. That's you're getting one bad person, you're getting rid of one bad person and replacing it with another bad person. If you're looking at, say, from the Tony Blair era all the way down to where we are today, would you honestly say that we've had a human being placed as a prime minister in this country that is actually a decent person, an honest person?
I would say, looking at her record since, right, I'd look at, they got Liz Truss out of there so fast. She must have been a threat to them. 49 days. So she must have been some sort of serious threat, the way that they got her out there fast. She clearly wasn't going to play ball, but she was perhaps unready. So,
but if that's the case, as an example, if that's the case with Liz Truss, that shows you where the real power lies then. If they, as you said, they got her out after 49 days, meaning there's a cabal,
deep state
that orchestrates it. So maybe, I think possibly with Liz Truss then, it could have been like a JFK situation. It probably knew that the whole system was corrupt, but I'll wait until I get into power. When I'm in power, I'm going to be in a position of immunity so that they can't get at me, and then I'll make reforms as I see fit.
Yep.
Not realizing that the deep state set an example with what he wasn't assassinated. For me, he was executed. It reminds me of a gag once used by Bill Hicks, where he said that every new president that's elected in America is normally taken down into a room, and they show the execution of JFK from another camera angle, and then they rub their hands and say, "Right then, Mr. President, any questions?" Now, that's a joke from many years ago, but and from what you've just said now about deep state, I find it very difficult to separate the two. That there is something bigger behind politics that is controlling the whole world scene. Yeah. Now, one question I wanted to ask you though, and I did send it to you in one of our private chats. I don't know if you had the time to look into it or read the question, and that was Robert Smith, who was one of who was the Labour leader before Tony Blair. Was he a Fabian? Because I find it, if he's not, it's interesting that if he wasn't a Fabian, that he was only Labour leader for 2 years, then died of a heart attack.
I have no idea. But remember, the Fabians don't necessarily encourage you to join them. They encourage you to follow their dictates, so you're associated with them, but you're not actually a member, because they want control. They don't want to be seen to be controlling. You there, Thunders?
Yeah. No, I obviously they don't want to be seen as.
You mentioned that the Fabians want people to be on side, but not necessarily to be members, because they want deniability. So I don't think so. But let's get off. I mean, talking about who runs the government, that's a topic we don't have anything hard on, So let's get to maybe this one. Brothers accused of assaulting officer at Manchester airport will not face third trial. Now, of course, as you know, if you or I punched a police officer in the face, broke their nose, and sent them to hospital, I believe they sent at least 2 officers to hospital, we would still be in prison 2 years later. Whereas, as you can see here, this is what they did to a police officer, but that's okay because it's the religion of peace, and if the religion of peace does it to you, it's just fine, and you're a bigot for complaining about it.
And one has to bear in mind that when this incident took place, just after their arrest, the protests that were held outside the police station by the Pakistani Muslim community as well. So it was more than just this. There was pressure put on the police from the protests outside the police station.
So just so you can see here, her nose was not only broken, but torn open. And she had to have stitches on her nose. Now, I'd say that is grievous bodily harm, but grievous bodily harm while Muslim is legally acceptable in the UK. So
this would be one of those interesting situations, because I don't know if we're going to be bringing it up today, but what's taking place in America with a Carmelo Anthony affair, where they were talking about how many people on the jury were actually were actually black, and then suggesting that the jury were prejudiced because Carmelo Anthony was black. That story is a different thing, but it was interesting that question was raised over in America. It would be interesting to know, to see, well, how many members of the religion of peace were involved in the jury on this one.
I wonder, in the Carmelo Anthony trial, in fact, black jurors were selected. However, don't forget, this happened in a majority white neighborhood.
Yeah.
Black jurors were selected, but they openly said they would not, under any circumstances, find a black brother or black person guilty simply because of the color of their skin. They were immediately biased and prejudiced just on the basis of he's black, therefore he's innocent. And in fact, something like a third of the jury was Muslim, Indian, and from Asia. So this was not 100% white jury. And of course, they just released the video, I believe, yesterday of the incident.
Yeah.
And the camera footage was released, and claims made about he was jumped by 5 people. And so none of that turns out to be true. So all of these stories are falling apart. But of course, it's a tribal thing. You have us versus them. And unfortunately, if you are a Westerner, you need to understand the third world mindset. It is tribal. It is very clearly us versus them. It is us versus you.
So I was going to say, if people don't understand that, the greatest evidence that I can propose, as somebody that's come from that community, is if you look at the rape gang report that has been released this year by Rupert Lowe, which goes back decades. We're talking about up to 250,000 girls being systematically raped, butchered, tortured, and violated as young as 12 years old.
Younger.
And what I would say is, not one, if that volume of girls, 250,000 within certain communities, can be violated, that goes back decades. And it's not just the police, the social services, and the local MPs and the local government didn't say anything, but what about members of the Pakistani community? That's where the source lies, because they would know what was going on. They would know. You're trying to tell me that the wives, the sisters, the daughters, the aunties of all these men that were doing these crimes were not aware the crimes were being committed?
They knew about it, and in fact, they aided and abetted. They faced no penalty. And in fact, in many cases, including the Carmelo Anthony case, they insulted the family and called for their harm, if not worse, in court or outside the court. And these are recorded on video, and nothing is done to them. There is no contempt of court. There is no jailing. But if there was a native saying this, or a white person, shall we say, that the law would be, as Starmer would say, look, there's nothing I can do. The best I can do is I can convict and jail those criticizing them.
But look at Naz Shah. Naz Shah retweeted that comment where that turned around and says that these victims should stay silent for the sake of diversity.
Yes.
So this is the mentality of brown-skinned people. They are ultra racist. That's what they are.
The thing is that if you're white, you have original sin. White people are guilty of being white, which is the original sin. And you then have the case that all all actions against you are justified morally because you are white and whites have been the worst evil in the world, and therefore it's all justified forever. I mean, basically, this is how the argument plays out.
And,
So
in this instance, you're watching the same sort of thing, because if you think about it, there was CCTV footage from the airport. There would have been body cam footage from the police. You would have had eyewitness testimonies of people that were in the area watching this thing unfold. And you're trying to tell me they still couldn't get a conviction? You had police testimony, eyewitness testimony, body cam and CCTV, and you still can't get an agreement on a conviction.
Yep.
There's so many things there are so many things in the United Kingdom at the moment, as far as the legal system is concerned, that just does not make sense. And
No.
I have been arrested and convicted for crimes, normally violent ones, in the 90s. And it is obscene to me that this sort of, and I was arrested for minor things, for minor violence in comparison to this, and yet I had to do or get convictions against me. Yet this.
Yeah, and here you're kicking a policeman, but that's okay. Yeah, we have a lot to get through, so let's not dwell too long on any one given issue. But notice how they get the benefit of the doubt. Missing context. He's not in prison yet. Well, there's missing context.
Isn't that what they say about the Quran? That's the normal Muslim default. You're taking it out of context.
Yeah. So police force orders officers to keep record of Brighton's anti-Islam comments. So yeah, this is interesting, but I don't see them acting very hard on these hate preachers in these mosques that are saying things like white people are cattle and this country belongs to us and we need to use terrorism to take over the country. This is not an unusual type of comment that you find in these mosques, but it's okay. But the police logs could be shared with future employers because you're not on board with Islam. In fact, you're not on board with the gay agenda. You don't praise and lick the feet of the LGBT. Therefore, you're a bad person.
Yeah,
this is where we're heading.
Employers are suckers for this kind of tactic that's been handed down from the government as well. I think there is also some kind of financial incentive for some companies. If they employ immigrants, then there's I think a £5,000 reward, or maybe there's a little bit more. I might have misunderstood that. So there's actually an incentive for employers to employ people from these kind of backgrounds. What the end game strategy is, I don't know. Is that to be a prejudice against the local demographic or the indigenous people of the country to make them more frustrated? I think that's probably more likely.
Yeah. Just so by the way, this leads to a story we'll cover in a bit, but Brandon White's mother says that the police toned down her statement after an asylum seeker murdered her daughter, right? And let's go back to the image. You can see here it is. You can see here, this is the guy that did this. Let's just open the image here. This is the man that murdered her daughter, and they toned down her statement because they want to control the tone. They want to control what he said because they're terrified that the blatant truth is going to incite some kind of response. They're not interested in dealing with the problem. They're dealing with the reaction. They're not interested in stopping the migrants murdering young girls and young men. They are very concerned about what people say about it. They're more interested in policing what people say after the fact and demonizing that and actually dealing with the problem, because they realize that if the natives get restless, that could lead to a problem they cannot control. So the whole point is to pacify the natives.
That goes into the two links that I sent you earlier on today, where when these things are taking place within the United Kingdom, there's a PR management company getting involved in order to put out certain comments and reaction points to, as you say, tone down. Because when I found out about, because I learned about the PR companies getting involved with these things with the recent crime that took place in Portugal with the Madeleine McGann situation, where they have a PR company by the name of Bells Pottinger. involved in the PR and keeping Madeleine McGann kind of like still consistent in the public mind. Every now and again, her face will come in the newspaper, or some article will come up with about some search that's going on for her abductors. That being, what I'm trying to get at is that obviously they've extended it down to other crimes as well, where they see fit that needs to be a PR company to go in there and try and shape up the narrative so there's not a backlash. But what's interesting is if anybody's watched, say, politics in certain spheres, they use certain, say, repeated buzz phrases for a period of time, like bad apples, or that was a bad apple, this is a bad apple situation. And you're finding with these crimes now where this woman's daughter's been stabbed, you find it with the Henry Nowak situation, you're finding it with the Carmela situation, and where they're saying things like, our family is fully supportive of diversity. We support diversity. We don't want anything to happen to the immigrant community because they contribute so much to the wealth of this country, or they contribute so much to the NHS, all these sort of things. So, but my response is, if you go back to the Bible times, especially the book of Exodus, when manslaughter took place, there was a thing called the city of refuge. So if you accidentally killed someone, there was a thing called the avenger of blood, which is the family relative was entitled to take your life. So what you had to do if you accidentally killed someone was to flee to the provision of the city of refuge, and you had to stay there until the high priest of that city died. That was the process that God put in place. And that's in the book of Exodus. I'll get you the reference if you want. What I'm saying is, it's a natural inclination for a human being, okay, that when a family member dies or is murdered, for them to be righteously indignant. I find it incredibly hard to believe that everybody that's a victim of an indigenous or or somebody of a different color to themselves, basically white people being murdered by black, are all coming out saying exactly the same thing.
We don't politicize the murder of my son. Did it not cause division? You know, yeah. I wonder. It must seem like they're coached, and yes, they are. They are given a script to read out. This is the case.
But you're not seeing the parents read it out. You're seeing somebody represent the parents read it out. So you have to ask the question.
The parents also given an idea of what to say, because the phrasing, the whole messaging is very much of a sort, right?
It's the chaperoning. But what concerns me is, what is it if you're a father of a son and your son's been brutally murdered in such a fashion? What is it the police are doing to make you comply with the script that you've been told to adhere to? Or
they're probably. Who knows? I don't necessarily think they were threatened, but they're probably said for the good of the state, for the good of national security, for the good of social cohesion, so that we don't have further violence in the streets. They'll probably try to appeal to them, but this is starting to.
Would that work with you, Lloyd? Would that work with you if you had a daughter and your daughter was raped by a gang of 3 men? You're trying to tell me that you would somehow comply with what the police have got to say.
Look, first of all, at the moment, think about it. The UK government is now setting out to gag social media, especially X, where a lot of this news breaks. They want to prevent 16-year-olds from accessing social media. They want them to vote, but they don't want them to have social media. And they, of course, want to permit 11-year-olds to start puberty blocker trials once again, so they can trans all the things or gay all the things. But they also want the social media groups like X to amplify the BBC and state-approved broadcasters or news propaganda channels, because they feel that these have the correct kind of news, and they want those voices amplified. They want those services amplified because they're very concerned about the growth of, shall we say, the alternative news media or citizen journalism. So you're seeing that there is a reaction to this. Right?
Just for those that are interested, I've managed to locate the scriptural references, Numbers 35, 6 to 32. So Numbers 35, 6 to 32 is where in the book of the book of Numbers talks about the cities of refuge and the provision that was provided under the Mosaic system. So just to comment.
let's not. We don't have time to dwell on at length with every single topic for 10 minutes. We've got a
Okay,
whole bunch
let's
of
try and
ads
do.
to get through, and yeah, man in his 50s taken to hospital after crossbow shooting at University of Surrey accommodation. Apparently, a Saudi man shot someone with a crossbow, and I watched the police walk him out to the car very politely.
Did they offer him anything to eat when he got back to the police station? Something
Maybe
halal?
they gave him a foot rub and they apologized for having to put handcuffs on him. I have no idea, but I mean, even Vikram Digwa, the man who murdered Henry Novak, wasn't even arrested according to reports, and he was handed his choice of free meal once he got there.
I think with this one, though, the interesting thing is you can actually legally buy a crossbow. So I think this particular crime will be used in order to ban the selling of crossbows in the United Kingdom. Because up until, I should imagine that will happen soon, because you could actually buy certain types of
Yeah,
crossbow in this country.
it's amazing that the level of tolerance. But yeah, of course, now this man was barred from the police for questioning Islam. I actually listened to his interview, which was very interesting. And he wins an appeal. He was suspended because he raised questions during supposed diversity training. And he made it clear that he was a Christian. And of course, he was then basically made his environment turned very hostile and he was eventually pushed out of the police. And of course, he's won a settlement. I'm not sure where it will go from there, but it just shows you there's a bias against the religion that established the UK. And of course, UK residents, their views, that their culture is being displaced in favor of foreigners.
It's almost putting the fear in people to become Christian or to identify as, because identifying or to become one is almost like there's a threat there.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, there's definitely an issue, but news like this is becoming more common. People are speaking about that. This is one reason they want to ban social media. So, while you have the opportunity, start to speak on social media. This is actually important. Every voice amplifies the message. Every voice, every dissenting voice is like I've mentioned before, this purity that they want to create, this false idea of purity, this white bath of milk. And you want to be that little drop of black ink. And all they see is that little black drop. And you want more and more of these black drops. And eventually those black drops simply tell everybody who's looking that, yeah, the story of the purity is false. There are issues here that need to be examined, and it destroys the false propaganda narrative that they're trying to create. Yeah, Britain is bleeding. It is very sad. But look, this idea of send everyone back, this is growing. You see this message growing. So man in hospital with serious injuries after violent attack in North Belfast. That's very vague.
Yep. This is the one that everybody knows. This is the Belfast situation where the guy was nearly decapitated.
Yeah, why didn't they have it Muslim man nearly decapitates disabled man for no reason?
The interesting thing with this one, though, is the reaction from people in government about not so much the crime. They don't want to talk about the crime. They don't want to talk about the Sudanese guy who committed the crime. They don't want to talk about his mindset or the ideology that he adheres to. All they were concerned about was people had it recorded on their phone, and social media platforms were allowing the footage to go on social media platforms. That was all they were concerned about. That was more important to them than the fact a guy nearly got decapitated, which should yet again tell you the mindset of people in power.
Yep. And they're more interested in stopping the video from being shown. So when you meet the disbelievers in battle, strike their necks until you have subdued them. So this man obviously thought he was going to war because he was striking the necks and he had subdued them. So yeah, that clearly was his plan. So yeah, it's interesting that when violence targets white people, whichever the country happens to be, it is minimized and the reaction to it is demonized or even criminalized. Whereas should it be to one of these supposed minority groups, then that is 24/7 news. It's crazy. I mean, the
Yeah,
Henry Novak story was held back for what, 6, 7 months?
yeah, yeah. Nobody knew about it really. I didn't know about it. I don't think anybody really knew about it. But the fact that it took so long before it came out into public consciousness is indicative of the situation that we have with the media and the legal system.
Yeah, people should realize that even the Sikhs who are fairly well regarded or generally very
Yeah.
well regarded, this doesn't mean that they are, shall we say, the salt of the earth and walking saints. At the moment, you see lots of, like within Iran, you see lots of people saying, look, the Kurds, the Kurds, the Kurds. My first time to Iraq, to Erbil, to Kurdistan, when I got off the plane, I was met by my chaperone, shall we say, and the first thing he said to me was, "Do not look at the women because the men will beat you up." That was the first thing he said to me. Don't look at the women; the men will beat you up. So Kurdish men are fully represented within all of these rape gangs or all of these other drug gangs or whatever it is across Europe. The Kurds are not holier than thou. They do not walk on water. Yes, they may be the enemies of the Islamic regime in Iran, but this doesn't make the Kurds good people or your friends. It just means they're friends of convenience, but they follow the same ideas, they have the same logic, they follow the same clan structure, they're tribal and they hate you too. You need to realize this.
Can I just add on that? With reference to the Sikh community, I have never known a problem take place within the Sikh community. And I'm 58, so I know the community. Never known a problem like this. Has actually come as a surprise to me. But, you know, this guy had form. The Sikh guy Digwa had form within his own community. However, what I have noticed is that some Sikh members have actually come out and said that Nowak was a racist. He'd lost a football game the day previous. So when he went out on a Saturday night, he was actually looking to go for a fight because he lost a football game the day previous. So there is the Sikh community now of actually behaving in a manner that I actually do not recognize and find very hard to
think about this. If there's an issue, which side is the Sikh community going to come down on? The majority of people are going to vote tribal.
But the thing is, the Sikhs are regarded in United Kingdom very much like they do the Gurkhas, because the Sikhs had their own English battalion in World War II, just like the Gurkhas did. So that's why they're highly regarded people. This is why I find it very hard to believe, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah, but think about it. Ultimately, whose side are they going to be on?
Ultimately, you would think they'll go on the side of truth and integrity because that's what they got the reputation for. But obviously, in this instance, you're finding that barrier breaking down.
Yeah, but tribal people work according to tribal lines. There's a tribal in-group preference. And besides, you're bringing in so many outsiders, you're just creating division, you're creating fracture. You don't have unity. You've got too many different ideologies you've got to accommodate. You've got to give special dispensation to the Sikhs, you've got to give special dispensation to the Muslims, you have to give special dispensation to the Hindus, you've got to this, you've got to that, and so on. And at some point, you just constantly bend over and they encroach on your own freedom, your own rights. You don't see respect for Christmas. You see, no, you've got to ban Christmas, but you have to put up Diwali lights and you've got to give credence to Ramadan. And it's constantly how this goes. So yes, there has been violence from these communities. And while they've been well behaved, the thing is, at what point does that maybe change, right? So yeah, police checked his phone. Yeah, they went to his father to tell him, hey, by the way, your son was just murdered, and can we have your phone because we want to find out if you're racist so we can justify his murder and say, yeah, he definitely deserved it. That's pretty much what happened with. And we know
that has come out recently, hasn't it? The police were trying to shape the narrative as to blame Henry Nowak, and this goes back to what I'm trying to say. Or I was trying to say to you earlier. How the heck can the family be complicit or compliant with the police when they're setting up PR statements? How, if as a father, if I know the police were trying to set up my son falsely as a racist, there's no way I'm going to deal with them. I'm not going to liaise with them or succumb to their PR machine. You know, I'll be speaking out about it. This is where I find there's something going on behind the scenes that doesn't make sense, because there's a pattern of victims being complicit or compliant with the government narrative that gets released about how they support diversity and inclusivity and such.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, inclusivity. You know what? As a black person in Poland, I can tell you, 7 years ago, things were different. I was just an oddity, right? But now you can tell that I live in a small town now in Poland, and I go to little small places, and not many people speak English here for a start. But I can tell that when I go places, there's a certain hesitation by the Polish because they see a black guy, and unfortunately, as you know, 98% of black immigrants give the rest a very bad name. And unfortunately, the news has not been good. So therefore, you can see that people have a certain hesitance when looking at me. There's a certain caution. You can sense it. You can feel it. They look at you. Are you one of them? You get that feeling now, which is very unfortunate. And this is not going to go well. In fact, today I saw a video of Poland, of a Muslim family in a minivan wanting to pray in a public place. They took their carpets out and they started wanting to pray, and a Polish guy ran up to them, or walked up to them and started screaming at them and told, "Hey, this is Poland, get lost. Not here." And he heckled them until they got in their car and got lost. But yeah, the Poles are not going to put up with this, and their culture is still very strong. And yeah, even the Brits need to start to have some backbone. But the problem is, any reaction to anything like this is criminalized. I mean, preachers are getting arrested for preaching in London streets or in any town in the UK for that matter. But Muslims can pray in public, literally on the street, and that's okay.
The Christian preachers, if you go back to an article that we discussed several months ago, where Canada wants to ban certain passages of the Bible as being hate speech. Now, that's very subjective because who is to determine if you're going to make the Bible a hate book, then that pretty much means you can't quote it, but that's the direction that Canada wants to go in. I can probably supply the reference next time. But what Janice is saying,
Quran, are they planning to ban anything from the Quran?
No, well, that which is interesting because you and I discussed many years ago on the Gin and Tonic show that the epitome of hate speech is the Quran. If you're going to ban hate speech, you're going to have to ban the Quran. There's no greater piece of literature that is more hateful than the Quran.
You know what's interesting? Then you've got this report here of teacher and 2 pupils stabbed in school attack, right? There's another report of a migrant attacked 3 children, stabbing 3 children recently, about a week or 2 ago, because he failed to get, I think, a welfare payment, and he attacked children because of it. And there's no coverage on the news. Very interesting how that happens.
Can I do? Janet just said a moment ago that where was it? She says, I used to get angry talking about the UK. I always get angry talking about the UK. I never used to. I think, Janice, the reason why you do, I think we discussed this privately once with Lloyd, and that is because you and I are of a certain age, and we remember the 70s and the 80s and the 90s in this country and how beautiful it was. Girls could walk home at 2 o'clock in the morning on their own. I saw it for myself, gave lifts to girls I didn't even know, and people would get in your car. That's how the country was. But we've seen the decline. And the decline is what gets us angry. We get righteously indignant because we remember how good, coherent and cohesive this country was. Not anymore. That's why you get angry.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I just saw this now. Christian cop suspended after fellow officers reported book in his locker by ex-Muslim turned Christian. So a Christian cop has a book in his locker by an ex-Muslim turned Christian, and he is suspended when the book is reported. So, yeah, reading without a license, I guess. So,
this is thought crime, isn't it? This is thought crime. So books are becoming. We get into was it Fahrenheit 451, is it, or Fahrenheit 457, or whichever the Ray Bradbury book was, with reference to books. Books are now becoming dangerous.
Yeah, I knew it was a Nabil Qureshi book. I just knew it. I knew it would be. So this was the book, and of course he is now suspended because he. I've actually read this book. I think I bought it. What can I say? So this is the UK now. You can't read about Islam from ex-Muslims because you need to kiss the feet of Muslims, or you are, the wrong type of person. It is very calculated, and yes, they are wanting to ban the Bible. Clearly, all of this is anti-Christian. It is anti-Western. It's anti-Western and European culture. And the sooner you realize you're in a fight, it is you versus them. It's an us versus them situation because they are against a certain kind of culture. And yeah, I mean, they've taught white people to hate themselves. That's fine. There are Jews that hate themselves and that turn on their own type, their own kind, their own people, their own history, their culture. But yeah, I mean, look, they'll even go against me because I am the wrong kind of black person. I don't, I am not politically black. So therefore, that's a problem, right? So you need to understand this is not going to end peacefully. I don't see this.
No.
Everyone's friend, exactly. Yeah, Thunders.
I was just going to say, Catherine says it feels deliberate and calculated. Catherine, I totally concur with you. I personally, in my estimation, this goes back decades where a vacuum was created within secular lands. That vacuum was created by atheism. And then this is what you get. This is a byproduct of atheism, where it created the vacuum where all these problems start to exist because there was no foundational bulwark. It was all removed and broken from Darwinian evolution taught at school, atheism when you get to your teens, there is no God, or if there is one, he's a hateful, spiteful, capricious, vacant landlord. You create the vacuum, and this is what you get. This is the world you inherit when you remove biblical, objective, theistic, moral values. This is what you get.
Yep. Please understand, Christianity is the flag that you need to rally around because the UK is a Christian country. Now, people might say, well, most of the UK is secular today. That doesn't mean anything because the UK is based, its law, its culture, its morals are based on Christian culture, based on Christian moral teachings. It's based on the Bible. It's based on the example of Jesus and the apostles. So as you start to move further away from the example of Jesus and the apostles, you're going to move closer to the commies, and we know how murderous the commies were in the 20th century. Communism, in fact, the 20th century was the communist century, and it was the most violent and deadly century in recorded human history. The communists murdered more people in one century than had been killed in the previous 2,000 or more years. So the communists were bloodthirsty, lethal atheists, right? And of course, yeah. So in that gap that you're leaving, you're going to have Islam and you're going to have these murderous commies, and neither of them are. These are wolves who are not organizing for the benefit of the sheep. This is true. Dawkins has a lot of blame here.
Yeah, I hold him blood guilty for a lot of what's going on. In my estimation, he's got blood guilt on him.
Yeah, the king is head of the church and state. Where is the king? Where is Charles?
Probably at the local mosque praying.
Yeah, I would prefer he was down at the pub drunk, and then we could have a good excuse.
That would have been his auntie, the Queen's sister, Margaret. She was always down at the pub drunk.
Yeah, but at least if the king was down at the pub, at least you could say, okay, well, fine, I get it, But this is different. So, by the way, German woman beheaded, homeless African male. They forget to tell it's a Muslim male, arrested for murder, right? So a German woman is beheaded in Italy, I believe it is, in Milan. So a German woman is beheaded by a man in Italy. Somehow this didn't really make the news. I'm not sure why. One would think this would be news, but then, of course, they'll application had been rejected. And yeah, he goes, and boy, you can tell just from the look on his face, he's evil. How do you know that? Because he's white, and therefore it's okay to murder him. And don't look back in anger. And oh my God, are you trying to start a backlash against all the peaceful Muslims? You racist bigot, you.
I didn't know about this story. This is news to me.
Yeah. So look, at the moment, I think genuinely people, if you look at the Carmelo Anthony saga, you look at Henry Novak, you look at what happened to this man in Scotland who was nearly beheaded. The word Islamophobia is no longer carrying the kind of weight it used to, and we need to push back. You need to have your own, shall we say, propaganda terms. You need to have your own powerful rhetoric to use to push back. And what seems to be a very useful term is to say, I have black fatigue. It's not racism. No. It's black fatigue, right? It's not Islamophobia. No, it's Muslim fatigue. we have Islam fatigue. Simple, just use those terms, right? Because it places the onus on them, right? Because they come up with these fancy rhetorical terms that spin the whole argument and place the burden on you. So you need to do the same. But this is I have think about it. They try to make Carmelo Anthony the victim. Oh my God, now I have 5 sons. What do I tell them now? Yeah, tell them not to stab people. How about that? Follow the law. Don't don't trespass and then fail to leave when asked to leave politely 15 times and then threaten people with violence and then murder them for basic contact. Or how about people who are trying to claim that not 2 people have lost their sons? No, 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 no. Carmelo is alive. His family can go visit him, whereas unfortunately, Austin Metcalf, his family can't go visit him where he is. So these arguments are fake, and they're no longer working as well as they did. People have black fatigue. So simply, look, and the problem is that when you run out of goodwill, and the goodwill has been abused, when the goodwill runs out, there is going to be contempt and there is going to be anger. And then if you keep pushing, you've used up all of the restraint. And then there is going to be a backlash that I don't think people are ready for. Yeah. But I do genuinely sense that backlash is coming. Thunderous.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it seems to be happening in many, not just in one country, it's happening in several countries. The same things are happening. And the modus operandi is exactly the same for these smaller communities where they're antagonizing the local indigenous. It's not unique to one area. It's happening everywhere. I think it's all part of a pattern. I think it'd be stupidly perverse or hopelessly ignorant to challenge that statement. And I agree with you, Lloyd. This is going somewhere. This is leading somewhere. And I was going to say this in the private chat, but I recently went to my my sensei's dojo, which I hadn't been in for years, because a certain martial artist that appears in movies actually made a guest appearance. And I'll tell you privately who it was. But
I can guess somehow.
I trained, and I realized as a 58-year-old man, when you send you the footage, you're going to probably laugh at me. I just can't get up anymore. My knees are gone. Once upon a time, I would have been ready for this kind of stuff that's going to happen. But now I look at certain people of my generation that feel the same way as I do. And we're looking at people below us of another generation, and they've come from university or they've been brainwashed with this woke ideology. And I think, where is the resistance going to come from? Because the ones that had the heart and the mind for the resistance, we're too old. And the ones that have come after us, like say someone that would have been the equivalent of a child if I had one, or my grandchildren if I had them, I don't see many men in that area capable.
I will say this, in South Africa, you guys might remember not that long ago, a couple of years ago in South Africa, there was a massive uprising in South Africa where tribal blacks went on a serious rampage. They tore through Durban, through Natal. They burned down massive warehouses. They looted, they robbed, they broke things, they smashed things, they stole entire warehouses, they stole entire inventories from stores, and they went wild. They tried to enter neighborhoods and steal property. I've been a victim of that. That's the reason I left South Africa. But a dedicated group of people, black, white, but people who shared a certain cultural worldview, came together. They had trained, they had prepared, they were armed, and they managed to repel the invaders and calm the situation. So you don't have to be a majority to deal with this. You just need to be a very well-organized minority. Yeah. A small group of very well-organized people can deal with a much larger group who are not readily organized. Go on, Thunders, and I'll finish my thought.
I didn't mean to interrupt your thought, but while you were speaking, it reminded me of a comment, and I think it might have been, what's his name? Officer Tatum. He has his own channel on YouTube, and it was a comment that you just said previously about other black people are fatiguing with reference to what's happening with the Carmelo Anthony situation. It reminded me of something that he said, that if there was a race war, he says you can have, say, 1,000 black people with guns. He goes, but the fact, by the way that they hold their gun, they're not going to hit the target. But you've got white people living in certain areas of the country. They know how to hold a rifle. They know how to gun. They're firing on gun ranges every day. Black people don't do that. If you want a race war, white people will, only a small group of white people will wipe out the whole black community in Africa, because they know how to use their guns. They take their guns. They go to the rifle ranges. They know about military. They know about guns. They know about weapons. They know about the.
Now, if you want an example of that, you can look at the Rhodesian War or the African Bush War, right? The South Africans were outnumbered. The Rhodesians were, for instance, were heavily outnumbered. I believe their kill rate was like 40-1 because they were disciplined. They were trained. So you must understand that even in the UK, you may not be fully aware of this, but and now part of this is speculation. Part of this is me having spoken with people in the past who were preparing for things like this, incidents like this in South Africa. A lot of ex-military people are obviously people of moral standing. They love the country and they have prepared documents. They have prepared plans. Not everybody, but when things kick off, people are going to obviously eventually look around and find where they can find people who are organized, prepared, and able to fight back. And yeah, those on the fringes are going to get picked off, granted. But there are people who have thought this through very carefully. They have thought about how to barricade themselves or how to barricade the enemy in, right? How to isolate them for various reasons, how to defend themselves, how to harden their communities, how to arm themselves, what to do to supply themselves with food and water, shelter, and so on. The UK, I can assure you, there are people who are busy thinking about this, who have thought about this, who are quietly organizing and getting ready in their communities. So this is happening. There are people that are carefully thinking this through. And these are the people that are going to win this fight. So yeah, there are documents online that discuss this. And so this is, people are going to be ready. People are going to be ready. But this is what happened in Durban. And this is what is coming to the UK. You already see it. It's all over Europe right now. It's not yet in Eastern Europe, thank God, but it is. They're going to try and bring it here. I mean, this is people just stealing whatever they can, people looting and stealing. And this is standard black behavior. So yeah, that's where I was. So yeah, so this 14-year-old boy lost his life, nothing in the news, but, you know, slap a Muslim, and of course it's going to be worldwide news for 10 days. And this guy was Palestinian, by the way. It was a Palestinian asylum seeker who murdered the 14-year-old and beheaded him. Next topic. So American woodsmen are a self-sufficient lot. Yep, and so are South Africans. So are old South Africans. Don't assume because they're old, they're not well prepared and well trained. And I can tell you, friends of mine in Germany, I've got to visit a friend of mine there. I know that amongst that community, having spoken to one or two people, a lot of people are getting their hunter's licenses, and they get trained. They train their sons get their hunter's licenses. The whole community gets the hunter's license. They all go hunting and they learn how to shoot. They learn how to handle weapons, and they buy a lot of weapons because one day they have the feeling that they might have to do more than just hunt for wild boar, let's say. So any thoughts, Thunderous, before I go on?
No, I think what you're talking about there reminds me some episodes that were on TV in the 90s that sort of almost mocked the American rural areas where they portrayed certain types of Americans as being hicks, uneducated, just fascinated with rifles, and they went onto certain farms. There was one farm, he actually had, I don't know how you describe it, but he had the you find them on ships, Navy ships, American military Navy ships that fires rockets or bullets, rather, of high caliber bullets, and it has 4 sort of like barrels, and he had one of those on his farm.
Wow!
Preparing for one. You find men with machine guns that you find on helicopters actually on their farm. So everything that you're saying there, when it comes down to it, some people, as you say, some people are actually in America preparing for like an Armageddon. That they stockpile foods, they stockpile weapons, they stockpile munitions. This isn't some kind of fantasy talk that you and I are having now. This has been documented on BBC TV.
No, those are preppers. I mean, those are preppers. But in the UK, it's happening all over Europe. People are thinking and talking about this.
Yeah,
this is a genuine issue. Yeah, but we can't. We still got a lot of tabs to get through. So 3 teenagers arrested over death of man in Essex. Boy, 14 among 3 people held. Now you know what? With the incident that happened now. now just today, I believe it is, when a white man, we know this for a fact because it came out within about 10 seconds. But of course, when the race is withheld and the names are withheld in the press, we obviously know that it's a person of color and usually a person of the Allahu Akbar variety. And this is stochastic terrorism. They don't have to plan it. It doesn't have to be organized. They just have to turn the virus loose. You have no idea who's going to be infected, but it's going to be panic. And in fact, the lack of knowing, the surprise, the worry, the fact that it could hit anywhere at any time, that preys on your mind, that weighs you down. That is just stochastic or random terrorism. So they don't have to have, this doesn't have to be ghost protocol, right? This is just you turn them loose and they will go and do their thing and they will cause chaos and mayhem. And then what they do is they don't deal with the source, they don't deal with the problem, they deal with the secondary order issues, which is the reaction. And they demonize the reaction, which further traumatizes. This is causing trauma, emotional trauma, shock, and anguish in the civilian population, the white British population. And of course, you feel powerless, you feel helpless. And then this emboldens the perpetrators. It shocks the victims into inaction. But I don't know how long that this rubber band can keep stretching, because I'm at the feeling that this rubber band is either going to snap or it's going to snap back real hard.
It's interesting. Would you say that that's part of the Hegelian dialectic then, that they create the problem, they wait for the reaction, then they offer the solution? So as you say, they turn it loose, some kind of mayhem takes place, they wait for the public reaction, and that public reaction is where they come in with an offering of a solution. But that solution might not necessarily be for the betterment of the indigenous. That solution might be more laws that tighten the grip on the said indigenous that are affected by the actions of these people. That's where I think it's going.
Yeah, problem, reaction, solution. If there's one thing David Icke said that's correct, I mean, the rest is just complete garbage from what I can tell. But problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, capitalize on the reaction, and then have a solution to the problem. The problem is not the problem is the reaction. Sergeant Grinch says, I'm physically no longer able to defend myself. I still have steady hands and strong trigger fingers. That's good. So keep those trigger fingers strong, Grinch, but also you've got years of experience. So you can think, you can write, you can talk, you can teach, you can mentor. I think those are important things, because, there's an old saying that goes something like, the nation that has, that reveres its fighting men and demonizes its thinking men, right, will have thinkers that are cowards and fighters that are idiots, right? We need to have fighting men that are intellectual as well. We need to have thinking men who are fighting men. You need to have people who are smart as well as dangerous. So we need both of those. And I'm sure you would qualify in that category. So I think you can start to create another generation like yourself, who was raised before everything went woke. Well, that's pretty good stats. That's a solidly good stat. Well, thank you, Catherine. So yeah, Thunderous. This is just stochastic terrorism, I think. Oh, yeah. And the Riku unit. This is disgusting. Honestly, this is disgusting.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier on, isn't it? It's about creating a narrative and putting words in the mouths of the victims.
Yeah. Janice says she's good at whack-a-mole. Janice, you'd be amazed that when the men were at war, women obviously had to take a strong role in running economies, in managing things, always setting up defenses. Sometimes the men were away and the women had to take their responsibility. So let's not assume that you come from, think about it, you come from a line of people, you come from a tradition where the men were at war and the women got to work in the absence of the men, right? And the women are capable. Women are capable of organizing, of using resources wisely, of playing a strong role. I mean, we don't know what the role is, but we can prepare, right? We can prepare. We can run scenarios. We can think this through. You come from a strong tradition where people fought back, where people did not surrender, right? You will fight them on the beaches, right? You will fight them in the burrows. You will fight them on the hills, right? So think about it. Churchill is your spiritual ancestor. He's your cultural ancestor. So don't forget that. And I think you need to all remember this, and that Britain at one point pulled together and it overcame, and it can do so again. You are now facing, this is not a crusade, this is a reconquista for all of these countries. You're engaged in what the Spanish did. This is a reconquista. You are conquering your country back. First, you find your moral courage, you find your voice, and then you will find your people, and you will then, once you remember who you are, you will know what you need to do. But first, you need to remember who you are. Thunderous.
No, agreed. But that's just on this news item alone. I think that when people are moving forward, when they're watching an event where somebody has been attacked, just watch for the response, look at the words and the statement that's being made, and notice a pattern that all these people seem to be saying exactly the same thing, like it's from a script.
Yeah, the purpose was to monitor and challenge the spread of Al Qaeda propaganda. All of this anti-terrorism stuff is now being turned on the people of the nation, you know, and don't look back in anger. Think about it. You know, there was this guy that stabbed these 5 men today. No one died, right? But of course, there's huge outrage. You have people like, what's her name? There's this stupid something sheikh. There's this woman that always goes on X. She's a British Muslim. She's Pakistani. And she always has the most horrendous anti-British, anti-white, racist takes. It's not Narinder Kaur, it's someone else, Bushra Sheikh. He always says the most disgusting things, right? But think of this. All you need to do now, when people talk about how this Scottish man, look, they're not going to care about the facts that statistically 90%, 95% of these assaults, these terrorist assaults in the UK are by Muslim men, right? They're not going to care about that. That statistically, while Muslim men are 6% or 4% of the population, right, they are 86% of the violent gang rapes in the UK, right? How is like 4% of the population responsible for nearly 90% or more in various scenarios of the major crimes, gang rapes, tortures, and other things happening in the UK? That's a crazy statistic. But
that's also in Europe.
Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's also in Europe. We're talking about England, but with those crimes, they're manifest in Australia, Europe, and I don't know about America, but definitely Europe and definitely Australia as well as England, that have that problem with immigrant crimes, which are disproportionate, committed by them in comparison to the ratio per capita of the indigenous demographic of those countries.
Yeah. So look, my advice is when they start to try and guilt you on the fact that but a white man attacked 5 Muslims and stabbed them, you can say, well, you know, don't look back in anger. You know, this is just a case of, you know, please don't try to demonize this. And you know, please don't, you know, you can't attribute the actions of one man to an entire community or an entire religion. That would be racist, you know. Tell them, no, this is just a single mental health episode. What do you mean? You know, you cannot attribute this to an entire community, you racist bigot, you know, so don't look back in anger, you know, and please don't try to politicize this event. Think of what the families of the victims would want. They would want privacy, and they would want us to find community cohesion and come together. What is this bigotry of yours, this racism of yours, to try to use this to demonize a certain group of people? Literally just calmly use the same rhetoric right back at them, because it's a very polite way of telling them to F off, because that no longer works.
Well said. You well said, Lloyd. You read it as if you wrote the script yourself.
Sorry. Great. What do you think, Thunderous? What do you think, audience? Do you think that would work? Because just turn their playbook back on them.
Yes, I absolutely do. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with that response, or that strategy, I mean, as a response.
Yep. If it's good for the goose, it is good for the gander. And you will notice, though, interestingly, this is now being used on social media. I was watching this today. This has become a thing. And you need to shamelessly, I mean, think about it. Do you know what? When I heard that this man stabbed these people, I realized that I had empathy fatigue. That at this point, I don't care. Now this may seem wrong, but at this point, we're at a place where you have had multiple horrendous attacks on children, girls, boys, women, men, old people. You see old people assaulted, 70, 80-year-old, 90-year-old women and men attacked by groups of men, robbing them or just beating them for fun and laughing at them and videoing it, putting it on social media and not getting arrested. And we are now supposed to have sympathy on this one incident that comes out at a very convenient time. I'm not saying the government initiated it, but of course it's going to happen. But this just happens at a convenient time, and it deflects from the fact of Henry Novak. It deflects from the fact of the rape gang inquiry that Rupert Lowe put out. I read the entire thing. I finished it yesterday. I think the only thing I didn't read was the appendices, but I listened to people discussing it. But I read the entire 219 pages. I went through the entire report, word for word, page for page. It is horrendous. It is evil. And anyway, I realized I have empathy fatigue. I don't care, because you're at a point where it's you versus them. It's us versus them. They don't care about you. The Carmelo Anthony thing turned people off. It said, look, we're done with this. If blacks are going to normalize murder, then I'm sorry, we're not on the same page. There is no discourse to be had. And if Muslims are going to constantly demonize people who are angry and shocked at their own natives being murdered in the street, being raped, being attacked, being assaulted, being viciously injured, and then and then your reaction to that is then demonized, you're arrested for it, you're sent to prison for tweets about it, and then you're supposed to show concern for Muslims who are then attacked. You're like, no, this is not fair. This is not an equal system, and therefore I'm going to go with my team. Simple as that. And yeah, I don't have any sympathy for your team. Your thoughts, Thunderous, on that?
No, I'm listening to everything you're saying there, and it's very hard to challenge anything of what you're saying. I think the Carmelo Anthony one really sort of like it wasn't so much that there was a core group of black people that were in defense of Carmelo. It was the fact that they were clearly rancid racist. They were willing to ignore the testimony of 17 people, the footage, all the evidence. They're willing to go against it in support of a narrative that white people are the cause of the problem. And it's the same thing. It's interesting that pretty much at the same sort of time as the Digwa situation came out, which is basically exactly the same thing. A white guy was the victim of a brown person killing him with a knife when there was no situation involved where killing him was the logical response to make.
And also, remember, they won't release the longer video because they tortured him. He was begging for help. They filmed him. They made fun of him. They ignored him for an hour.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just find it, that how your mind is so poisoned that you're willing to go against eyewitness testimony and CCTV footage. And with the situation with the Nowak, it was the evidence on the mobile phone. And I fear for the fact that if they didn't have the mobile phone with the evidence proving that Digwa was actually the instigator of everything, what would be the narrative that we have now? It's the phone that basically got him off.
Henry was begging for them to call an ambulance for over an hour. And they ignored him. They made fun of him. They humiliated him. So the whole family is complicit in murder. I don't know why they're not even pressing charges against his brother, who conspired and colluded, who aided and abetted a murder. It's crazy. So now, besides, look, it's a matter of just common sense survival at this point. If you want to survive against the evil that is currently oppressing you, then you're going to have to say, well, look, you have to make a decision. We are the natives of this island. We are the owners, the spiritual ancestors of our forebears. We are the genetic, the rightful heirs of the island. And our morality is correct. We believe in it. It is correct. And we don't want this evil to prevail. So you need to decide, this is evil. And if you don't want it to prevail, you need to oppose it and make a decision. This is not about now Yeah, so therefore it is us versus them. They have forced you. The thing is, you're not morally wrong to defend your life. You're not morally wrong to defend your culture. You're not morally wrong to stand up for what is good and what is true.
Agreed.
Because you know that you didn't take the fight to these people needlessly. You didn't take it to them for no cause. You were forced there. And they have forced you there. So you have a moral right to now defend yourself. Yes, you're going to face demonization. They're going to minimize the moral position. They're going to try and claim the moral high ground, but they are losing that moral high ground.
I think I think something else as well. Yeah, for those who believe in the biblical narrative, there is a perception that Jesus was a pacifist. Jesus was absolutely not a pacifist.
Yeah.
In any sense of the word. He was a proper man in the true sense of the word about being a man. And he's also spoken of as the one that's going, when the kingdom is installed, he's going to wipe out all his unrighteous people. So this is not a pacifist. This is a man of war. When the time is right for war, if you look at the situation when he goes into the temple and he kicks out all the moneylenders, you can see Jesus in passion with righteous indignation. So there is this perception that he's weak, skinny guy, that he's a pacifist and blah, blah, blah.
No, he sat down, he took his time, he made a whip, and then he went to beat people.
Yeah. So Jesus is indignant. He's not a pacifist. There is nothing wrong with defending your faith.
No, you're right. So I watched this video. Council enforcement officers threatened to knock out a member of the public because he was stealing their money, apparently, because he wouldn't comply with them, and therefore they weren't going to earn anything, and therefore they were threatening to. They wanted to walk him away from the environment to a quiet place where they could assault him. They've lost their jobs, but one has to wonder how much of this is the norm in this country.
The situation with them losing their jobs, Lloyd, is there's been suggestion of further footage of them being shown working a few days later. So I would hold fast if they actually did lose their jobs. Because, but the footage that they've got of them now, it could be old footage, not new footage. So we don't know. But at this moment in time, it is suggested that they've lost their jobs, but there is suggestion that they haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this one is shocking. A gay couple. Now, look, we all knew this was just a matter of time. We all know it's happening to other children. The gay left, my bad. But you have the gay right as well, which is kind of it is being tolerant, and there's also then turning a blind eye to certain things. But the gay lobby, big gay, redefined marriage. They simply presume that marriage is just people in love and they want to be together. No. Religiously, we defined marriage thousands of years ago as a sanctified union by God of a man and a woman who join together to form a family and who have children. And they raise those children and they continue in that tradition. That was marriage. It was religiously defined for thousands of years. Then the gay lobby comes along, big gay comes along and says, you just hate love. You just hate people because marriage is just two people getting together. No, two gay people getting together is nothing to do with family. It's nothing to do with creating a future. It's about orgasms. These are just orgasm chasers. This is just people who want to get their rocks off. It's as simple as that because they can't have kids. But of course, so what they need your kids. As you know, there's the whole San Francisco gay choir that was singing the song that included the line, "We're coming for your kids," and they mean it. And here they adopted a boy, I think it was 14 months old, and they murdered him. The health services ignored the bruises, the damage to this boy, to his rectum, of course, the bite marks on him. They were biting him in various places. They were abusing him. They were doing things to this child that are indescribable and
videoed it, Lloyd.
I want the death penalty. This deserves the death penalty. What Vikram Digwa did deserves the death penalty.
I just want to say that the fact that they filmed it means that there's an audience there. We know that there was the BBC news presenter Hugh Edwards that got caught and only got a suspended sentence for downloading, I think they call it category A child porn, which is the hardest type of pornography you can download of a child. Okay. So there is an audience out there. There was something I learned many years ago, which is what's known as the Soho effect. And the Soho
Yeah.
effect means that if Soho would not exist, lest there be a market for it. So people wouldn't be videoing themselves of violating children if there wasn't an audience there to serve those videos to, or to
Who may have
serve.
been paying for that privilege.
Yes. So this is it. We know people in the Labour Party, because I'll provide you a list of some 50 Labour MPs that have been caught downloading child pornography. Then we've got people in the BBC that have been caught downloading child pornography, and certain famous personalities downloading this. And I reiterate this and again, there is something chronically wrong on planet Earth, because this is all too often. I think that this is a serious problem worldwide, because there's also situations in the Ukraine war where reports have gone where children have gone missing as a byproduct of the Ukraine war. There's 200,000 children that went missing over Biden's presidency in America with the Mexican border. We've got children in our own country that are going missing on a daily basis, yet the only one you ever seem to hear about is Madeleine McGann. So I estimate that there is a serious problem worldwide with reference
No,
to...
there is. And here's the thing, though. Everyone lost their minds over Epstein, right? Epstein trafficked maybe, I don't know, a few dozen. I have no idea what the number is. I can't remember. Epstein maybe trafficked a few dozen, maybe a few hundred girls. Now you've got these Muslims who are known since the 1950s that have been trafficking at-risk white English girls. And the extrapolated number, they estimate 250,000 girls, right? Some of them raped by 600-700 men over the period, right? Multiple times, right? This is not the number of times they raped, just the number of men who raped them. And these by Muslim men. So you're looking at a scale that is well beyond what Epstein did. Looking at a scale that is, and here's the thing, these are Muslim men who would phone their brothers, phone their uncle, phone their cousin, phone their neighbor, call their roommate, and 20 of them would show up, and they wouldn't let the girl free. No, they would join in, and then they would sell tickets. They would set up a schedule, and men would pay and come to visit, and they would kidnap these girls. And this is Islamic rape on an industrial scale. It's sickening. And so Epstein pales.
Don't forget the wicked, torturous things they did with burning cigarettes on them, using things like baseball bats and cans and bottles, where bottles got broken inside girls, where girls got pregnant and they were going down and having abortions. And so the medical, the NHS knew about it, the police knew about it, the social services knew about it, the MPs knew about it, and the local councils knew about it. You have to ask the question: how many of them were complicit in as well in partaking of this crime for so many people to be getting away with it during that period of time? There is
the government is guilty here. Police are guilty. Social services, the people who looked after the adoption homes, what do they call it? What do you call the child who has no parents? The orphanage, or the orphanages, the adoption homes, all of them are deeply, deeply complicit and guilty, and people need to not just go to jail. People need to be hung for this. And yes, and this boy had throat and mouth wounds. I didn't want to talk about that because it's too difficult to think about. But
this isn't unique to Europe. Spain has the same problems as well, where the migrants are going out to orphanages and places of childcare and taking girls from there, and in fact sometimes raping them inside the hostels. They're raping them inside the hostel.
I read the report. I mean, it's Friday and Saturday. I read the entire rape gang inquiry by Rupert Lowe. It is shocking, and so look, doesn't this make you angry? There needs to be retribution. There must be retribution for these crimes. There has to be a reckoning for these crimes. This cannot be left to stand. And look, you may not know how, we may not know when, but at the very minimum, we can speak about this. You can find your resolve, your emotional and your moral resolve. You can speak about this stuff clearly. You can educate yourself. You can speak, because they want your silence. And the whole point of this unit, this nudge unit that is designed to shall we say, spin the vocabulary, spin the rhetoric, spin the propaganda to create this whole idea of don't look back in anger and all of that. You can make fun of that. You can turn that upside down, but you can change that. And we don't know when, but there's going to be a spark. David Betts, Professor David Betts, he was a bit conservative on his most recent talk. He said he thinks it's very highly likely the UK will have a major civil war within 5 years, and it's inevitable within 10. Now, I've heard him more recently state this could happen tomorrow. We just don't know what the spark is going to be. I think it would be less than 5 years, but you're going to start seeing stochastic violence. You're going to start seeing this tit for tat sort of response. I think this is going to start happening. And of course, the UK government is going to come down harder on the locals because they need to suppress that, because that can flame up into a majority again versus what is ultimately a minority war. And but it is going to flare up at some point. And we just don't know what the trigger is going to be. But in the US, you see that they've now focused on the fraud. But of course, you also have to focus on the fact that there is such kind of trafficking involving children, involving minors, even involving adults. This is organized. And you're going to find Muslims at the heart of a lot of this. You find the fraud is majority Muslim, and foreigners. The poor are more of a burden upon you. That bottom 2% of society is more of a burden upon you. Elon Musk is not raping your kid, but the poor migrant who came over on a boat that your taxes are housing and feeding and giving an education, he is. Honoris?
Yeah, I think just to conclude on this point, for those who accept the biblical narrative, if you go back to the days of the nation of Israel, child sacrifice was prolific. Certainly with the Canaanites, the archaeologists dug up hundreds of urns where they found the remains of children being sacrificed to the god they worship called Molech and Ashtaroth as well. So if you think that was going, if that was going on then, what makes you think that it's not going on now?
Look, it's going on now. It just takes on the characteristics of the time and the place, but it is the same thing.
Yes,
it is the same thing. And moving on. So let's try to. Okay, so this is fascinating. So these people, and she converted to Islam. Now we don't know if she was converted under duress, and of course then you have the whole Stockholm syndrome thing. But she was converted to Islam, and but they forced women to drink bleach and urine. They set one victim on fire. And of course, she did so at the behest of this guy, this fun-looking Muslim guy. His name is Muhammad. He could be Buddhist. I'm not sure.
No, you got that right there, mate. You narrowed it down to one because it's the name of one.
Yeah. So look, this is just, there's just too much of this. It is no longer a coincidence. Forced women to drink bleach. Yeah. So this is insane. Yeah. The sad thing is that you don't know if she was originally a victim herself that just went along just to stop the torture.
Yeah, I think probably, like you say, Stockholm syndrome. That's probably the likeliest. Another example of somebody that's come from a broken home, from the local demographic, broken home. Had a hole in her heart, and he came along and filled that hole in her heart with paying her attention. She bought into it, or was likely deluded into it, probably abused her, thought that it was probably, if she's come from an abused home, the likelihood is she thinks abuse is part of the normal culture of life. And then just merely applied it to the next victim and third victim that came along, thinking it was normal.
Right. I want to mention one thing, though, for people that are dealing with this. I put this on X a little earlier. Okay. I put this on X a couple of days ago. Yesterday, in fact, I put this on X. And I just want to mention something in regards to, there's an argument people are making. Now, I've seen people literally laughing and making fun of the rape gang report as if, well, thank you very much, Art Butler. He says, Lord Almighty, you're just, and you examine the deepest thoughts and hearts and minds. Let me see your vengeance against them, for I've committed my cause to you. Yes, retribution is not vengeance. It is not being a vigilante. Retribution is just punishment for evil committed. And there needs to be a retribution. There needs to be compensation. You're very welcome, John. Excellent. And thank you very much, Art, for that donation. Really appreciate it. I want to mention something with regards to the statutory inquiry. dismissal of a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people make this claim that, oh, Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry is useless because it doesn't have statutory powers. Okay, now these rape apologists, and I would think they are rape apologists for dismissing the rape of hundreds of thousands of girls or tens of thousands of girls. Even if it was 5,000, I think that's 5,000 too many. But they fail to realize a point that I've seen even Maggie Oliver. Now, unfortunately, even Maggie Oliver, in her wisdom, decided to, shall we say, dismiss the rape gang inquiry. So, I mean, even she's had exactly roughly fuck all success with the UK government, excuse my French. So who was she to dismiss Rupert Lowe's work? Who is she to dismiss the effective work they've done in finally getting this moving when the government is still dragging its feet after years, right? Now, Maggie Oliver has stated this herself, and I saw this on an interview she did with CNN 18. It's a TV channel in India, when she stated that even a statutory inquiry, an inquiry that has statutory powers, even the government inquiry, the supposed Labour rape gang inquiry with statutory powers, has exactly 0,000 enforcement authority. Literally nothing. It has exactly as much teeth as does Rupert Lowe's report. But at least Rupert Lowe's report is done, right? So no inquiry, statutory or otherwise, has the power to force the government to implement its recommendations. Think about it, there was an inquiry a couple of years ago that was done, the J report. How much of that has the government implemented? I can tell you, fuck all.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly nothing. They've done nothing. Right now, Rupert Lowe's report is and was necessary. This horror has to be exposed. So under the UK's legal framework, and this was a much longer thing, I had to just pare this down because it's actually quite detailed. There's the Inquiries Act of 2005. An inquiry is an advisory body. It finds facts, it establishes blame, and it offers a roadmap. So once the chair delivers the final report, the inquiry legally ceases to exist. It has no enforcement mechanism. It has no policing power. It cannot take the government to court for non-compliance because once the report is delivered, the inquiry is then dissolved. It then no longer exists. That report goes on a shelf and it is forgotten. In fact, it probably goes on the round file under the desk because they have a little round blue file under the desk and that's where the report goes. So if the government can ignore the final results with literally zero consequence, why are these people quibbling, right, over making a grooming gang inquiry statutory? Because the statutory authority of a statutory inquiry is zero. So the information needs to be put out and the court of public opinion needs to decide. They are terrified of the backlash when the English patriots finally rise up. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
No, I agree with you and everything that you're saying there. The whole report to me, and I've not read as much as you because I've got other things I'm reading at the moment, but I've read about half of it. And if half of it is all you read, if you can stomach for it, it's not light reading. It beggars belief that we're living in a day and age now where these are known crimes. We have the victims and we have the guilty perpetrators and we know the addresses, and nothing is being done. Actively, the only conclusion I can draw in all of this is that because of the close ties via consanguineous marriages, these men served as procurers of children for people in higher position, and because they're products of consanguineous marriages, their loyalty through blood and their loyalty through religion would mean that they would not inform on each other. So I think that possibly other people that were not related to the Pakistani community were probably beneficiaries of the crimes that they were committing. That's a very hard thing to prove, but for so much to have gone on for so long, there's something more insidious taking place there.
Right. Also, by the way, the UK government has now apparently opened at least 8 old inquiries, right? So several cases are now in the wake of the rape gang inquiry. Several inquiries have been reopened, and they now need to go back and charge people. They now need to go back. However, the issue being, and this is Maggie Oliver speaking again, the they spent like 186 million pounds or something on one of these reports. They didn't hire new policemen. They haven't changed the culture. They haven't removed the Muslim police officers who are sympathetic in a tribal sense to their own people. And so sure, they've sent back at least 8 of these cases to be reopened, re-examined, for the investigations to be redone. But who's going to do them? The same people who botched them before, the same people who did nothing before. Where's the? And besides, you've got you've got whole counties who are unable in any shape, way, or form to solve any car thefts or any serious crimes. They can go after tweets, however. They can get 30 officers to arrest you at home for a tweet within 20 minutes of you sending the tweet. But there are places where not a single car theft has been solved in 12 months. So this is crazy. There's no enforcement. So this is more just talk again.
I think the danger is as well is that if you're looking at certain police stations, police areas of control, you don't know how many of those people are still involved in the police, that if they were involved in some kind of local investigation into these things, if they're for their own benefit or maybe for their own guilt, chaperone the investigation into a direction where they see fit. So you don't know how much influence old school people are still there, or still old school people that may longer not be serving and have been pensioned off, but still have a measure of influence to navigate the investigation into a direction where they want it to go to.
I mean, the UK is,
this one here, police log hated students against mother who failed to call her trans child by their new name. This for me is where the real problem lies, in a manner that I don't think people understand. We've already seen where children can go to school, and this is primary children can go to school, identify it as being the opposite gender, give themselves a name, and the school are under no legal obligation to inform the parents that's what's happening at school with their child. The fact that a parent has had a hate crime registered against them because of the child that they gave birth to no longer wants to use the name that was assigned to them by their parents. You have to ask one question in all of this: who the heck influenced the child that they could change their name?
Of course, I mean the school
could change their name, and it would be enforced by the school, but now also the police. Now, if you think about what's going to happen next year, this is where I think Keir Starmer is probably going because of this that's going to be implemented, which is the having to register your details if you're under 16 or for social media access is another way of, if you're over 16, you have to register for the access. So it's a data capturing trap.
Yeah, but but you've got to prove you're over 16, which means it's not just children that are being rejected. Every single adult will have to qualify for getting on to the internet.
Exactly. There's the point.
It's trapping everybody. This is not a kiddies thing. This is an everybody thing.
But it works twofold, because it's also suggesting that parents don't have the right to govern and determine what information or what
gadgets. That's Marx. The state owns the child.
Exactly.
This is Marxism. This is basic Marxism from Marx's early writings.
And you add on to that several years ago, I think it was about 15 years ago now, where the school has the rights, because there was one case that came out in the United Kingdom where a 13-year-old got pregnant. The school arranged for the child to have an abortion, and they were under no legal obligation to inform the child of the parents of the child of the 13-year-old girl that they'd arranged an abortion for their own daughter. The parents only found out because the dinner lady told the parents, because the dinner lady knew the parents. That's how it came out. So we're looking at the state having more control on children than what people realize. If you go back to I've sent you links to certain material that they're teaching in school now about how to spot a racist, how to help an immigrant. So if they're getting trained at school, as an example,
this has an implication that they are racist and they should be scared of racism. Racism is terrifying. So they're actually spreading racism. They're creating a phobia. They actually are making the problem worse. So they're inculcating the issue into people. And of course, you're not allowed to find racism in blacks, I bet.
Right. This is it. So what happens is, if they go home and the child, let's say the parents are talking about something on social media, or there's something in the news, or maybe something about putting the flag out, the child can effectively go to the school teacher and say, this is what my mummy and daddy said. That's where the problem is. So the children are getting controlled more by the school than they are getting influenced by the parents, which is yet again another way of undermining the biblical narrative, where the parents are under compulsion to raise their own children in their own household with the mental regulating, as it says in Deuteronomy, of Yahweh. But now the school is turning around saying, no, we will educate your children. We will indoctrinate your children.
Yep.
In fact, we are the parents. You're nothing more than the babysitters.
Yeah, no. So, and then of course, we should be angry over the decision not to bring charges against the brother of Henry Novak's killer. He helped him lie to police. He was recorded colluding with the brother to lie to police. Now, I mean, this is clearly a double standard. This is clearly two-tier. And I mean, you guys are just, at the moment, the UK government is just rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. You know, they're just swapping the chairs out and replacing one Labour idiot, one Fabian Labour idiot with another Fabian Labour idiot. But look, I mean, this can't go on forever. At some point, the rubber needs to meet the road. Seriously, this cannot go on forever. They can't kick this can down the road permanently.
Chloe's made a comment in there. Many people are taking their children out of school and homeschooling them. I wonder how long that's going to last, Chloe, because that is obviously increasing. People are now, I've hearing a lot more about home children. Their children. I wonder how long that's going to last, where they make it a legal obligation that you have to send your children to school.
Yeah, you know what? Hold on, hang on. I just want to get something. Yeah, you know, besides, I mean, you guys need to realize that this is Helen of Congo. Okay. This is Helen of Congo, the most beautiful woman in the world. The face that launched 1,000 ships or some yeah, what can I say?
I'll tell you what you can say, right? I know what this is referring to, right? But I've got a more insidious one than that. Cynthia Erivo, the black lesbian who plays Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah. Let's find that. So, oh my gosh, okay, brave, so blah, blah, blah. Don't you just love all this new stuff? There was a time, yeah, Jesus Christ Superstar, everybody. Just so you can see, here is your Jesus Christ. Hang on. And if you don't like Jesus Christ, then you're a racist bigot. I can't help you. So here you go. This is Jesus Christ Superstar then versus now. The resemblance is incredible.
It's uncanny.
Yeah. So look, if I were you, look, if yeah. Look, seriously, they are stealing your culture. They are stealing your past. They are stealing your country. They're stealing your history. They're taking your identity. And yeah, you need to understand this is never going to stop. It must be stopped. This is not going to stop. You need to learn to find a way to call it what it is. You need to find a way to spin the argument in your favor because they are using spinmeisters to spin it in their favor. This is not Jesus Christ. This is a cow with a nose ring, right? This is a black lesbian, a bold black lesbian with I would assume some kind of mental issues. And yeah, I don't know, man. This is not, as I said, we had Helen of Congo, and here you've got, I don't know.
Is that Andrew Lloyd Webber? I think it's one.
He looks like it. I can see why his wife ditched him. Yeah, so you may want to let's have a look at this one. So look, really, yeah. Look, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to come up with the hashtag not my Jesus, if that's okay. Let me just get that out there. Hashtag. Give me 1 second. Hashtag not my Jesus. Sorry, but no. Repellent. Yeah, this is sick. And you're going to need a very large bottle of bug spray to get rid of this crap. This is not going to stop unless you stop them, unless you push back hard. This is going to keep happening. They're not, they hate you, they despise you, they despise everything you stand for. You need to understand this. It's hard. I know that the whole system is against you, right? You say anything, it could turn into an HR incident. So you're going to have to learn to play within the confines of the game, but this is not impossible. This can be done.
Yep. Yeah, Chloe just made a comment there. Black author claimed that black people built Stonehenge. I was actually going to comment on that, Chloe. That's part of further things that are taking place within the education system about how the Stonehenge was built by black people, but not just Stonehenge, that black people were the first people on the United Kingdom as well. I think history is being rewritten quite deliberately. But I think the best person to listen to on that is Rafe Hadel Manku.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty good.
He's probably the best person to speak to on or listen to on that.
Yeah. So as we know, they tried to intervene even while the court case for Henry Novak was on. And when they knew that he had not done anything wrong, the police still tried to smear and slander Henry as racist and having committed a racist crime against Degwa to justify the murder. So they were trying to mitigate the evidence by painting and smearing Henry Novak as the aggressor to then justify his murder. This is the police. So, yeah, one has to wonder, the state is your enemy here. The state is not your friend. And this is disturbing. Yeah, let's skip this one. Let's skip the zoo attack thing. Yeah. So this one is pretty bad. My 20-year-old daughter can't find a job, and the reason is infuriating. The reason is that white people are being impoverished. They're stealing your jobs too.
Yeah, okay. So the priority from all employers now is to employ migrants at the cost of employing local people from the indigenous population.
Yeah, they are literally impoverishing white people. They're stealing your jobs. They are giving preference. This is racism that gives preference to outsiders, to foreigners, and they want to impoverish you. They want to destroy you financially. This is dimitude. You're paying a tax it's just dimitude for the 20th century. If you think about it, how many churches are being set on fire? They can't find funds to rebuild these churches. They can't find funds to repair these churches. And under the dhimmi laws, the dhimmi is not allowed to repair his church. They're not allowed to rebuild a church. They're not allowed to build any new churches, but they do have money. They do have 40 million pounds to give for the safeguarding of mosques. They've got exactly fuck all money to give for the safeguarding of churches. You are a dhimmi. You need to understand that they're applying these laws slowly but surely, and this is simply dimitude for the 21st century with British characteristics. And yeah, Thunders?
Yeah, I'm just thinking on this situation, if the roles were turned around, like we shouldn't be employing people from black or brown communities, or people that are blind, or people that are disabled. Can you imagine the backlash? Can you imagine the media backlash on this? And but you know, if it's white people, then gone are the days when I actually have the responsibility for the role that I do at the bank I work for. I have the privilege of interviewing people for the role. But recently, I had to go through a training program on diversity and equity, and it was strongly hinting at trying to give roles of people that are not non-Indigenous. So we've gone away from meritocracy, and we now have to fill diversity quotas. And I work for a major money lender in this country.
Yeah. So hold on. So guys, you need to get into the hashtag diversity. Okay. You need to definitely get into the hashtag diversity. You figure out how to spell it, but yeah, that's all it is. It's just making things worse. And in fact, the system favors foreigners, immigrants, illegals against the native white Brits by 27-1. So only 1 in 27 of these jobs that used to go to young British teenagers and youth, only 1 in 27 of these jobs now goes to a native Brit, because 26 out of every 27 jobs is going to some guy that hates you. So yeah, this is shocking. This is shocking. Of course, we've spoken about this. They're going to prioritize the BBC, and they're going to try to obviously use censorship because they feel the pain.
This is the centralization of media then. So what we're going into now is very 1984, where you'll only get one mouthpiece telling you what the news is. This is what it is.
Yep. Yeah, and then the last one. So this French right-wing activist, she was nearly raped by a migrant, Tunisian migrant, I believe. When you see the original interview, I remember when this happened several years ago, I actually watched the interview. She is visibly shaking. She starts almost crying. She's shaking. You can hear her voice is shaking. She's traumatized. Her body starts to tremble. You can see the shock that she's in. And she says, we French women who are assaulted by these men, we know that the major threat to us women who survive these incidents is not French men. It's these foreigners, these Arabs, these Moroccans, these African migrants that the government is letting in. She said this, and she was charged with a hate crime. She was charged with incitement or whatever, and she was nearly sentenced to prison. I think it's only because there was such a public outcry and so much public attention focused on this. Her name is Tay Descoufon. Okay? Her name is Tay Descoufon. And she was spared prison for saying this. Apparently, having an opinion after you were nearly raped by a migrant, and the facts and figures quite literally do bear out. For instance, Afghan migrants are known statistically. In Germany, they have some fantastic figures, which I've covered on the channel. The official German Bundesamt, the Bundeskriminalamt, the German state criminal authority, shows that I will have the figures wrong here because not in front of me, but I have covered them at length on the channel before. That, for instance, men from Afghanistan are something like 67 times more likely than a native German to rape a woman, right? Somalis are like 58 times more likely. Ethiopians are 78 times more likely, and so on. You're about 49 times more likely to be murdered by a Somali, for instance. These are the kinds of figures. You are 16 times more likely to be raped or murdered by a Pakistani than a German. And don't forget, this is like a tiny fraction of the population versus a very large percentage of whites. And the chances are something like, the chances are like 70 times more that a foreigner will murder or rape you or rob you or beat you. And she's right.
All the statistics from France, Germany, Italy, Sweden, Denmark, England, Australia, all the statistics back what she's saying. Now, yes. Even I listened to the interview, and I think you and I and many people are listening to the show and will listen to the show later are probably savvy enough to know when someone is talking, whether they're exaggerating, lying, or trying to fool you, or they're speaking with a sense of truth and honesty. And I've listened to the interview as well, and it's very easy to see that she's been very honest and sincere in the interview. However, even if you wanted to grossly say that she was lying and that her interview was fabricated, my response to that is, well, how close is it to the lie to make her think that she can get away? How close is it to the truth to make her think that she can get away with the lie? And the reason why I say that is because all the numbers, all the statistics, even if it is she was lying for her own situation, but tells the truth for other women that have had to suffer more than what she's done at the hands of the immigration that's taken place in Europe. Let's not forget. Yeah. Let's not forget that it was only about 10, 12 weeks ago that in Spain, a girl that was raped by 3 immigrants, brutally raped by 3 immigrants, tried to commit suicide by throwing herself out of a 5-story building, ended up as a paraplegic, and then because the suicide failed, she opted for state-assisted suicide in Spain. And rather than care for her, what did Spain do? Spain suicided her because that's what she wanted, even though it was under protest from her father and her family. This is where we are now, that the traumatic effect of what's taking place in Europe is leading people to try and take their own lives because they can't live with what's happened to them. And what does the state do? Rather than comfort them, rather than make arrests, rather than make the environment safer, no, if you want state-assisted suicide as a way of getting that out of your mind, we will kill you at your request. That's where we are now. Belgium do it, Spain does it, and Canada will state-assisted suicide you if you're flipping homeless.
Yeah, actually, you know what?
And
You know
coming
what? I don't know if
there,
you guys have ever watched the movie. I don't know if you guys have ever watched. Let me just get this up. If I recall, I don't know if you guys have watched the movie Network.
yeah,
I'm
got it.
mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Yeah,
I watched this movie. It was actually really good. There were some really interesting points made, right? And he makes this fantastic. You can watch this on YouTube. I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat, and we sit and watch our TVs while some local newscaster tells us today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We all know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything's going crazy. So we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we live in gets smaller. And all we ask is, please, at least leave us alone in our own living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my hairdryer and my steel-belted radials, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to write your congressman, because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the defense budget and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is, first, you got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm a human being, God damn it. My life has value. So I want you to get up now. I want you to get out of your chairs and go to the window right now. I want you to go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell. I want you to yell, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Now,
and
this is Thunderous, go on.
I was going to say, and when was that written? Wasn't it right about 73, 74?
This is 70s, the early 70s. I watched this movie. Watch the monologue on YouTube. It's fantastic. And it's go on.
There's another monologue from a TV series. I think it ran for TV 3 seasons, where I forget what the show was, where somebody was talking about a guy that's pretending to be a member of the media, and he started relaying the facts that how America is like 4th as far as education is concerned, 6th as far as something else is concerned, 17th as far as something else is concerned. So there are clever script writers that are honest enough to tell you what the reality is of where we are in the world. Yeah. But that particular one that you've read there is of more significance, because the latter show says something that was quite obvious, that we all have access to via the internet and doing by a simple entry level research. But that was 1973 or 74, when there was no access to the internet. And if things were so bad that they felt the need to put that in the script then, and they thought they could get away with the script as it was then for people to understand what was going on, we're in a far, far darker situation in 1973 when the script was devised.
Look, we've come back from worse. People have come back from worse. So look, I hope you will take heed. I hope you will be mad. Nigel Farage was not wrong when he said you need to have a cold, calculated rage, right? Because that is not violence. That is you take stock, you think rationally, and that anger is a motivator. That anger forces you to take stock of the reality of the ugly situation you're in, and you think, fine, I am not going to take this anymore. I'm going to deal with this in a calculated, careful fashion. You're not here to throw your life away. You're not here to become a martyr, but you are here to say, I am going to be ungovernable under rules which are illegal. I am going to take whatever legal action I can. I'm going to overload the system. I'm going to poison that well. And that is a metaphorical statement, YouTube and MI6, who are probably listening. You are not going to allow them to foist their propaganda anymore. You are not going to be a victim of their propaganda, their particular effort to control your mind and your thinking and limit your thinking. You are going to see clearly, and you need to speak up so that others can see they are not alone. You are not alone. Others share your views. You are not alone. You are not deranged. It's not an aberration. You are correct. You are morally correct. You are morally justified in taking a stand, and you are up against a system that is immoral, that needs to ultimately be destroyed. and you have a right to your homeland. These are not to be questioned. These are not even matters for discussion. You have every right to make sure that guests in your home behave, and these guests have overstayed their welcome, and they should be expelled. That's my final word. Your final word, Thunderous.
Yeah, my final
Yeah,
word.
no. Hey, I don't disagree that Nigel Farage is, shall we say, a questionable entity in politics. Granted, but he was correct. All I said was he was correct in regards to that cold rage. Yes, I'm not calling anyone, and we should not call anyone to be violent. Violence will happen. It is probably inevitable. I don't think it can, because what is happening here is social violence. It is societal violence that is being foisted on people. It is oppression. It is totalitarianism. It is gaslighting. It is causing distress, and it is going to erupt as violence. This, I think, is unavoidable. But I'm not calling on you to be violent. There are other means you can take. But yes, you are being forced into that corner. That is happening, clearly. And, but yeah.
Yeah, to Chloe Cox, so like she says there, NHS doctors from abroad found to be working in local hospitals didn't have actual qualifications. I think Lloyd and myself covered that several months ago, where it's been found where people from certain countries have come over with fake certificates of medical certificates.
Yes, we covered that last month, yeah.
Yeah, so this is not unknown. We are aware of it, and I dare say there's probably other roles of employment in this country where people with fake credentials have gained access to roles within there. But as my final thought, as we end the show, is that if people are familiar with the Bible, there's a situation between the nation of Israel and the Philistines, and Goliath is standing taunting, saying, well, who's going to come if you send out your best fighter and if I fight him, if I kill him, then the nation of Israel have to become the slaves to the Philistines, and vice versa. And now, knowing the nation of Israel should have known that Yahweh was protecting them. They knew that Yahweh was the God, but not one of them stepped forward until King David, a shepherd boy, stepped forward. The point I'm trying to make is there are a lot of people that have the courage, but they're waiting for somebody else to say something so that they can respond. We're living in a culture of fear, where a fear has been created of you having an opinion, saying anything, telling the truth, or exposing a reality of what another person's ideology is. That's the fear that we're living in at the moment. And many people want to say something, but they don't know what to say or even how to say it. Sometimes we may have to start the conversation ourselves to get people to engage with us in that very much like David and Goliath way.
Yep. So, guys, you know what? I'm going to end off by putting a link to the Rape Gang Inquiry Report by Restore Britain in the chat, right? So please download a copy of this report. I've read it. It was horrific.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, did I read everything? So hold on. Yeah, I'd read up to, I think I read up to page 180. I haven't read the appendixes. Maybe I'll do the appendixes. So I spent 2 days going through it. I read it. So I will go through the appendices, I think. But please download a copy. I put it in the chat, right? And guys, I think we've said enough here. If you're a Christian, your job is to fight against evil. If you're just a reasonable, rational, good person, your job is to oppose evil, because kindness and tolerance of the wolf is injustice to the sheep. You're simply just allowing those sheep to be led to slaughter. And I'm not asking you to be wolves. I'm asking you to be sheepdogs. The sheepdog protects the sheep. The sheepdog is the friend of the family. The sheepdog is the hard worker, the ally of the farmer. And when the wolves come knocking on the door, the sheepdog goes to work. Not because the sheepdog is violent, but because the sheepdog loves and protects what is behind it, and it will destroy the threat in front of it. It is not there to do harm. It is there to stop the threat. And this is what we need to be. So be a sheepdog. My final word. Thank you, everyone. Thunderous.
Yep, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lloyd. I know it's the show's been longer than what we anticipated, but there was a lot of material to go through, and no doubt tangents that we knew we were going to go on. So thank you for going through that material, and I look forward to our next discussion.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. and we shall see you all probably tomorrow. I'll be back online. Maybe Thunders will join us, and with, of course, JC. So everyone, good night. Have courage. God bless.